He told her she was finished. In the shiny glass office of the divorce lawyer, a tall man in a navy suit leaned back in his chair and laughed in his wife's face. His name was Derek Cole, and for 10 years he had reminded his wife Kayla that every good thing in her life came from him. Today, with papers spread out on the long dark table, he finally decided to cut her off completely. He told her she was a nobody, that she would crawl back to him when the money ran out. He watched her sign the last document with shaking hands. He watched her stand up slowly, clutching her small purse like it was all she had left. Then he watched her walk out step by step into the quiet hallway. Derek stayed in his chair. He didn't leave. He wanted to see what happened next. In his mind, she would push the elevator button with tears in her eyes, go downstairs, and stand on the sidewalk waiting for some cheap old taxi. Maybe she would have to count crumpled dollar bills just to pay the driver. The picture made him smile. So Derek moved to the window instead. 40 floors below, cars crawled along the street. He checked his watch and waited, watching the front door of the building like it was a movie. He was ready for her shame. He was ready to enjoy it. He was not ready for the sleek black car that rolled up to the curb. He was not ready for the man who stepped out in a tailored suit that made even his expensive clothes look cheap. And he was not ready when that man walked straight toward the doors like he owned the whole city and stopped right in front of Kayla. Hi friends, welcome to today's story. Before we go deeper, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our powerful stories. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Are you in New York, Texas, Nigeria, the UK, Canada, or somewhere else in the world? Now let's go back to where this all started. Kayla Cole used to think her life was a blessing. When she first met Derek, she was 24, fresh out of community college, working 2 jobs just to help her mom pay rent. She worked mornings at a coffee shop and evenings cleaning offices downtown. She fell asleep on buses, woke up with lines from seats pressed into her face, and still forced herself to smile at customers because tips meant groceries. Derek walked into her life like a movie scene. He came in one rainy afternoon, shaking water off a black umbrella, his silver watch shining under the shop lights. Everyone in the coffee shop went quiet for a second, just watching him. He was handsome, confident, the type of man people always moved out of the way for without even knowing why. He ordered a simple black coffee, but he watched Kayla as she worked. She remembered that day clearly. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her apron had a stain from spilled milk, and her sneakers were so old the sides had started to peel. When she handed him his drink, he smiled at her like she was the only person in the room. "Rough day?" he asked softly. She laughed, embarrassed, and shrugged. "Just a regular one," she said. He looked at her name tag, then back at her face. "Well, Kayla, I hope one day your regular days don't look like this," he replied. It sounded kind, almost like a blessing, and she carried those words in her heart for a long time. Derek came back again the next day, and the next, and soon he was staying longer. He asked about her goals, her dreams, what she really wanted to do if money was not a problem. No one had ever asked her that before. One night, as she wiped a table and he stood by the window, she finally told him the truth. She wanted to start a small business, something simple, maybe an online store selling handmade planners and journals that help people manage money and build better habits. She had been sketching designs in a little notebook since high school. He listened with intense eyes and nodded slowly. "You're smart," he said. "Smarter than most people in those fancy offices I go to. You just need someone to give you a chance." Hearing that made her heart swell. Soon, Derek was picking her up from work, bringing her food when she was too tired to cook, and paying for a new pair of shoes when he saw the holes in hers. He told her he worked in finance, that he helped companies grow, that he knew how to turn ideas into real money. To a tired girl who had lived on cheap noodles for months, it sounded like magic. When he asked her to marry him 2 years later, he did it on a rooftop with city lights shining like stars. He gave her a diamond ring that made her hand look like it belonged to someone else. "You'll never have to struggle again," he whispered as he slid the ring onto her finger. "I'll take care of everything." Kayla said yes with tears in her eyes, thinking God had finally seen her secret pain and sent help. She moved into his modern apartment, quit one of her jobs, and for the first time in her adult life, slept without setting an alarm for 4 a.m. At first, marriage felt like a dream. Derek bought her clothes she had never dared to even touch in stores. He told her to stop worrying about every price tag. He took her to restaurants where the menus did not have numbers printed on them. He said things like, "Just enjoy it, that's what having money is for." He made fun of people who were too scared to live, and she laughed because she didn't want to seem ungrateful. Still, at night, a small voice inside her kept whispering, "This is not fully yours, this can disappear." One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a show, Kayla pulled out her old notebook. The cover was bent, the corners worn smooth. Derek glanced at it and smirked. "Wow, that thing again," he said. "What are you going to do, change the world with paper?" His tone was teasing, but it stung. Kayla swallowed and smiled weakly. "No, I still think the planner business could work. You know, all those people who struggle to save money. I could design simple pages to help them manage small amounts. Like real life, not rich people numbers." To her surprise, he paused the TV and took the notebook from her hands. He flipped through the pages slowly, his eyes moving over her handwritten sections. Rent, emergency savings, tiny wins, debt snowball. There were bright stars drawn next to positive habits, small notes that said "you're doing great," beside the lowest income brackets. "This is actually not bad," Derek said at last. Kayla leaned forward. "Really?" he nodded. "You think like someone who's been broke, that's useful. A lot of people are like that, maybe it could work." For a week after that, they sat together at the dining table. He helped her break the idea into steps. She would design the pages. He would handle the business side, website, marketing, sales. "You don't need to worry about numbers," he told her. "That's my world, you just make it look nice and simple so regular people can use it." She felt important. She felt like they were a team. She stayed up late drawing layouts, testing different fonts, coming up with encouraging phrases. Derek took notes and typed on his laptop, asking small questions here and there like, "What if we made a version for students?" Or "How would you help a single mom with 2 kids?" She answered from her heart, remembering her own mom, her own childhood. Months passed, they launched the business online under Derek's main company name. He said it would be easier that way. "Bank stuff wastes time," he said. "We can add your name later, paperwork is boring." At first, sales were slow. Then one of his rich friends shared the planners on social media, adding a dramatic caption about finally understanding money like normal people do. Suddenly, results exploded. Orders came from everywhere. Emails poured in from women and men who said no one had ever made them feel smart about money before. Kayla read those emails with her hand over her mouth. She wanted to reply to every single one. But as the business grew, something dark also grew. Derek stopped asking her for ideas. He started calling the product his line. On calls, she heard him say, "Yeah, I created this new planner for low-income people," without even looking at her. At dinners with clients, he joked about how generous he was to explain basic saving to people who blow all their cash at the mall. When she tried to correct him gently, "Hey, remember we built this together," he brushed her off. "Relax, you made cute pages, I built a brand." The first time he truly embarrassed her was at a company party. They were standing near the glass wall, city lights glowing behind them with music playing and people laughing loudly. A group of Derek's coworkers asked how the business started. Kayla smiled and opened her mouth to speak, but Derek cut in quickly. "Honestly," he said, raising his glass, "she was just doodling broke people budgets in some old notebook. I saw potential and turned it into something real." The group laughed, not understanding how the words stuck inside Kayla's chest like sharp stones. She forced a smile, but that night she cried in the bathroom with the shower running so he would not hear. Little changes came next. Derek started checking her phone. He complained if she spent too long visiting her mom. He frowned when she mentioned maybe going back to school someday. "Why would you?" he asked. "You have everything right here. Just relax and enjoy what I built." When she reminded him that she worked hard on the planners too, he sighed and rolled his eyes. "You drew lines and wrote cute little quotes, Kayla. Don't act like you built a tower." Still, she stayed. She told herself he was just stressed. The business was growing and pressure could change people. She told herself he was still the man who bought her shoes when she had none, still the man who asked about her dreams. She hugged the good memories close and tried to push away the bad ones. Then everything changed one Saturday afternoon. Kayla had gone to visit her mom in their old neighborhood. The apartment building still smelled like fried food and cleaning products. Kids ran up and down the hallway as usual. Her mom sat at the small kitchen table, laughing as they shared stories. When Kayla got home a little later than planned, she opened the door quietly, ready to explain. Instead, she froze. A stranger's high-pitched laugh floated from the living room. Kayla stepped inside and saw a young woman sitting on the edge of the couch. She was wearing one of Kayla's silk robes, the soft pink one Derek had given her on their first anniversary. Her feet were up on the coffee table and her shoes were on the floor like she owned the place. Derek sat beside her, tie loosened, his hand resting on the woman's knee. For a second, they didn't see Kayla. The woman leaned closer. "So this is the place?" she said. "Not bad. I thought it'd be bigger though for the great money genius." Derek laughed smugly. "Trust me, this is just one of my places," he replied. "The best one is the office. That's where the real money is. My wife just thinks I'm always working late." The word wife dropped between them like a stone. The woman blinked. "She doesn't know," she asked. He shrugged. Why should she? Everything she has comes from me. Where is she going to go? Kayla's bag slipped from her shoulder and hit the floor. Both of them turned. The stranger's eyes went wide. Derek's face went from relaxed to stiff in less than a second. Kayla, he said slowly, you're home early. For a long moment, no one spoke. Kayla's heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Then something inside her quietly snapped. She didn't scream, she didn't throw anything. She just walked calmly to the coffee table, picked up her robe belt from where it had fallen, and said, "You can keep the robe, but you can't keep me." Derek stood up quickly. "Don't be dramatic," he started. "This is nothing, you're taking it the wrong way." His voice was too smooth, too practiced. Kayla looked at the other woman, who suddenly seemed much smaller and very uncomfortable. "You knew he was married?" Kayla asked. The woman swallowed. "He said you were basically gone already," she muttered. "He said you were boring, that you just sit around doing nothing and taking his money." That night, Kayla slept at her mom's house. She lay on the old pull-out couch and stared at the ceiling, thinking about every time Derek had called her lucky, every time he had said "my money," every time he had joked about broke people like she hadn't been one of them. The next morning, she made a decision. She went back to the apartment with 2 big bags and packed her things. Derek stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. "Where exactly are you going to go?" he asked. "You think your mom's couch is a long-term plan?" "I'll figure it out," she replied. He scoffed. "With what money? You forgot that all the business accounts are under my name. You don't have a job, you don't have savings, you don't even know our passwords. You are nothing without this life." Those words echoed in her head for days. "You are nothing." Finally, she called a lawyer. The office she walked into was clean and cold, with big windows and a view of the city that made her feel small. The lawyer, a calm woman in a gray blazer, listened to everything. Kayla told her about the planners, the notebooks, the long nights at the kitchen table, the business in Derek's name, the cheating, the insults, the way he talked about her like she was lazy and useless. The lawyer took notes without interrupting. When Kayla finished, she waited for the worst. She waited to hear that she had no rights, no chance. Instead, the lawyer sighed and said, "Kayla, you've been married for years, you helped build that business. Your ideas built value. The law does not see you as nothing. We can fight this." That was how the divorce began. Derek was furious. He refused to believe she had any claim to his company. "My company," he repeated in every meeting. "My money, my brand, she's just a housewife who drew on paper." He laughed at every request they made. When Kayla's lawyer asked to see documents showing how much the planner line had earned, Derek snorted. "You want to see my numbers? For what? So she can take my hard work and go play artist somewhere." Each meeting in that high-rise building felt like a war. Kayla sat at one end of the long table, hands folded tightly in her lap, heart racing, while Derek sat at the other end, legs spread, one arm over the back of his chair like this was a casual lunch. He smiled at everyone except her. When she did speak, he made faces, shook his head, and whispered to his lawyer. He acted like she was a joke. On the last day when they met for final signing, Derek pushed things even further. The conference room was bright and cold, the city spread out behind the glass like a painting. Papers were stacked neatly in front of them. The air smelled like coffee and printer ink. The lawyer explained the terms again slowly. Kayla would get a small amount of money, much less than what the business had made, but enough to start over. She would not be tied to Derek anymore. But Derek had added one more paper. He slid it across the table with a smirk. "One more thing," he said. Kayla's lawyer picked it up, frowned, and looked at him sharply. "This wasn't discussed," she said. Derek shrugged. "It's simple. It's just a statement saying she understands that she had no real part in building my company, so she won't use my name to start any copycat projects. Protecting my brand, that's all." Kayla's stomach twisted. "You want me to say I did nothing?" she asked quietly. Derek leaned forward, eyes cold. "You drew cute pages and cried about poor people," he said. "I turned it into money. If you want the deal, sign it. If not, we can go back to court. But remember, court takes time. Lawyers cost money, and you don't have any." His voice was low, but every word felt like a slap. For a moment, the room was silent. Kayla stared at the paper. Her mind flashed back to nights at the kitchen table, to emails from single moms thanking her, to a woman who once wrote, "Your planner made me feel smart, not stupid, for the first time with money." Those words had mattered to her more than any dollar amount. She picked up the pen. Her lawyer whispered, "Kayla, you don't have to sign this part. We can push back." But Kayla looked at Derek. He stared back with that same cruel smile. She took a deep breath. "You really think I'm nothing without you?" she asked. He laughed lightly. "I know you are," he said. You're about to walk out of here with a little check and no husband, no house, no real job. You'll be begging somebody for work in a month. If not me, then someone else richer and smarter. That's just how it is." Kayla felt something shift inside her. It was like a door closing quietly but firmly. She smiled, and the smile surprised even her. "Okay," she said softly. She signed where they told her to sign. She signed the divorce papers. She signed the extra paper Derek had pushed in front of her. She finished, placed the pen down, and folded her hands. Derek watched her with a satisfied look. "Good girl," he said under his breath. When everything was complete, the lawyers began gathering documents. Chairs scraped lightly on the floor. People checked their watches. For the others, this was just another case ending. For Kayla, it was the end of one life and the start of something she could not yet see. She stood up, picked up her small purse, and made sure her shoulders were straight. Derek leaned back in his chair, crossing one ankle over his knee. "So," he said in a mocking tone, "where are you heading now? Back to your mom's place. Maybe you can ask her to lend you lunch money." He chuckled. "You'll see, Kayla, without me you have nothing. No contacts, no status, no power. You're going to walk out of here, catch some cheap ride, and disappear. And in a few months, when you realize you can't survive, maybe you'll remember who made you somebody." He spoke loudly enough that even the assistant outside could probably hear. Kayla looked at him calmly. "You really think money is the only way to be somebody," she said. "That's sad, Derek." He rolled his eyes. "Spare me the deep talk. Go enjoy your new freedom." He made finger quotes in the air and turned his face toward the window. Done with her. Kayla did not argue. There was no point. She simply turned and walked out of the room. Her heart was beating hard, but her feet were steady as she crossed the hallway. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding and she stepped inside. As the doors closed, she let out a long, shaking breath and felt tears sting her eyes, but not from fear, from relief. The cage was open. She was finally outside of it. Upstairs, Derek stayed in his chair, fingers drumming on the armrest. Something inside him made him stay. He told himself he only wanted to make sure she really left. He told himself he wanted to see her stand on the sidewalk, small and alone, waiting for some beat-up car to take her away from his world. He told himself her final humiliation would be his final proof that he had always been right about her. He got up and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. From his spot, he could see the front of the building clearly. People moved like tiny dots on the sidewalk. Cars lined up at the curb. He watched the glass doors, waiting for her to appear. A moment later, he saw her, little dark coat, simple bag, hair pulled back neatly. She looked like someone going to a regular job, not a woman leaving a wealthy marriage. "There you are," he muttered. Kayla stepped out into the cold air. The wind hit her face and she closed her eyes for a second, feeling it. It felt real, not filtered or controlled. She hugged her coat tighter around herself and walked slowly down the steps. She did not pull out her phone to call a taxi. She just stood there, waiting. Derek smirked. "Any second now," he whispered to himself. "She'll start packing, looking desperate. Maybe she'll even check her wallet." The thought made him almost giddy. He wanted this. He needed this. In his mind, if she looked small down there, it meant he was still big up here. But then something happened that Derek did not plan for. A long black car slid up to the curb, smooth and quiet. It was not one of those common taxis. It was the kind of car people rented for special events, or the kind extremely rich people bought without looking at the price. The driver jumped out quickly and opened the back door, eyes lowered with respect. Passing strangers turned their heads, curious. Derek frowned, shifting closer to the glass. "Who's that here for?" he murmured. The driver looked straight at Kayla and gave a small bow of his head, like she was someone important. Then, from inside the car, a man stepped out. He was tall, with broad shoulders and the kind of presence that made the whole sidewalk seem to move around him instead of the other way around. His suit fit perfectly, his shoes shone even in the dull light, and his watch caught the sun for a brief, bright flash. He didn't look confused, he didn't look lost. He looked like a man who knew exactly where he was supposed to be. He walked directly toward Kayla. From 40 floors up, Derek's stomach tightened. He pressed a hand against the glass without realizing it. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see the way the stranger's face softened as he reached her. He saw how Kayla's shoulders relaxed when she looked at him, how she smiled, not the small, scared smile she used to give Derek when he made cruel jokes, but a real one. The man reached out, took her hand gently, and lifted it to his lips in a brief, respectful gesture. Then he said something, and even from above, Derek could see his own ex-wife nod. The driver took her bag from her like it was made of gold. As Derek stared, frozen in place, the stranger turned slightly, just enough that Derek could finally see his face clearly through the glass. A face he recognized from business news, from magazines, from conversations where people used words like self-made, visionary, and billionaire. The man standing with Kayla on the sidewalk was not some random stranger. He was James Hart, and he was here for her. Down on the street, James opened the car door wider and said something else to Kayla, his eyes full of a quiet, fierce respect that Derek had never given her. Kayla glanced up once at the tall building she had just left, her eyes lingering somewhere around the floor where Derek watched. For a heartbeat, it felt like their eyes met through the glass, like she could see him standing there, small and shocked. Then Kayla turned away from the 40-story cage of glass and steel, slipped her hand into James' heart, and stepped toward the open door of the car. Before we continue this story and find out how Kayla, the woman everyone thought was nothing, ended up being connected to a billionaire like James Hart, and what this man really meant to her life, we'll stop here for now. The car door shut with a low, smooth click that sounded final, like the closing of a heavy book. Inside, the quiet was wrapped in leather and the faint scent of cedar. Kayla sat still, her hands folded in her lap, staring through the tinted glass as the city moved past in gray and gold flashes. For a few seconds she could still see Derek's building shrinking behind them, that tall cage of glass and arrogance fading, until it was just another part of the skyline. Her heart beat fast, not from fear but from the strange silence that always follows freedom. She could not believe that less than an hour ago she had been sitting across from the man who once promised to love her forever. Now she was sitting beside James Hart, a man whose name she had only seen on magazine covers. James sat beside her, not saying a word. He glanced at her once, studying her face like he was trying to read the story written there. He wasn't the type who filled space with useless talk. His presence alone spoke louder than most people's voices. The driver turned smoothly onto the highway, the city's noise fading into a soft hum. Kayla's mind felt crowded. She wanted to ask how he'd known she was there, why he had come, what he expected from her. But instead she just whispered, "Thank you." James's eyes softened. "You don't need to thank me," he said quietly, "just breathe." For the first time in months, she did. She took a slow, deep breath, feeling her chest rise fully like her lungs had been waiting for permission. The air inside the car was cool and calm, nothing like the icy air in that office upstairs. She turned slightly toward him. His profile was sharp under the afternoon light, jaw set, eyes steady on the road ahead. Everything about him carried quiet authority, but there was something else too, a gentleness that didn't match the billionaire stories people whispered about him. When the car pulled up outside a glass building with gold lettering that said Hart Industries, Kayla blinked. She had seen that logo on billboards and in magazines, always beside stories about technology, charity, and innovation. She hesitated, looking at James. He smiled faintly. "Come inside," he said. "We'll talk where it's peaceful." Inside the lobby, everything gleamed. Polished floors reflected soft light. Employees nodded respectfully as James walked past, some hiding their surprise at seeing him accompanied by a woman who looked like she had just walked out of a courtroom. He led her into a private office overlooking the city. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, but the room still felt warm. There were books on the shelves, photos of community projects, and a quiet hum of air conditioning. James motioned for her to sit, then poured her a glass of water. Kayla sat slowly, her hands trembling just a little as she took the glass. "Why did you come for me?" she asked softly. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed loosely. "Because you helped me once," he said, "and you didn't even know it." Kayla frowned slightly. "Helped you?" James nodded. 2 years ago I was trying to turn around a failing branch of one of my smaller companies. The employees were losing hope. My team brought me one of those planners, your planners. Someone had ordered them for staff training and I started flipping through one. It was simple, honest, made for people, not for numbers. On one of the pages there was a note printed in small letters. "It's okay to start small, progress is still progress." That line stuck with me. It reminded me why I built my business in the first place, to help people believe they could build something from nothing. I kept that planner on my desk until last month. Kayla's eyes widened slightly. She had written that note late one night with a marker, just trying to fill space between tables and columns. "That was my handwriting," she said quietly. "I know," James said. I read about your divorce last week. I recognized your name. When I saw you were scheduled for the final signing today, I asked my assistant to find out when it would happen. I didn't want you walking out of there alone, not after what you built." Kayla's throat tightened. She had no words. No one had ever spoken about her work with that kind of respect. She just nodded slowly, wiping the corner of her eye before the tear could fall. James smiled gently. "You built something real, Kayla. You gave people hope. Derek just found a way to sell it, but you were the heart." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent months being told she was useless, replaceable, dependent. Hearing the opposite made her chest ache with both pain and relief. "I don't even know where to start again," she whispered. "He took everything." James walked around the desk and handed her a tablet. "Start by looking at this." On the screen was a document labeled Partnership Proposal, Rebuild Initiative. Under her name, it read, Kayla Cole, Creative Director. Kayla blinked in shock. "What is this?" "A job offer," James said simply. "Not a favor. I've seen what you can create. I want to launch a financial literacy branch that actually speaks to ordinary people, and I can't think of anyone better than you to lead it. You design the educational side, build the human connection part. I'll handle the structure and funding. We share ownership 50-50. She stared at him, trying to process the words. "You mean?" "I mean you start tomorrow," he said gently, "if you want." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they came with a small laugh. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, she whispered, "Yes, yes, I want that." James's smile grew warmer. "Then it's done, and Kayla," he paused, meeting her eyes, "don't ever let anyone convince you that your kindness makes you weak. It's what makes you unforgettable." For the rest of the afternoon, they sat together going through ideas. Kayla talked about the new planners she had once dreamed of, the ones that didn't just track money but emotions, daily wins, ways to rebuild after loss. James listened carefully, taking notes, asking small questions that proved he was paying attention. It felt strange but wonderful to be treated like an equal again. By evening, the city lights glowed outside the windows. James stood and said, "You should get some rest. You've had a long day." He called his driver and told him to take her somewhere safe. When the car stopped in front of a cozy hotel by the river, Kayla hesitated. "I don't have a card," she said quietly. James handed her a simple envelope. "You do now," he said. "It's under your name. Use it freely. You'll need a fresh start, and I want it to be yours." She wanted to argue, to say she couldn't accept it, but she saw the look in his eyes, steady, not pitying, just kind. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, in a quiet hotel room with soft lights and white sheets, Kayla sat by the window watching the city shimmer. She opened her phone, stared at the social media account that once showed photos of expensive dinners and fake smiles, and deleted it. Then she opened a new account with a simple name, @RealKPlans. She posted one photo of her old hand-drawn notebook and wrote, "Starting again, still believe small steps matter." She didn't expect anyone to see it, but within an hour messages began pouring in, people who had used her planners, thanking her for helping them save money, start small businesses, or pay off debt. Kayla cried quietly as she read each message. The world she thought she lost was still there, waiting for her. Cross town, in his high-rise apartment, Derek Cole poured himself a glass of scotch and sank into the leather couch. The divorce had been finalized, and he felt a strange emptiness that even money couldn't fill. He told himself it was just exhaustion. He scrolled through his phone, opening an article headline that made him frown. Heart Industrias to launch new project for financial empowerment, with Kayla Cole as creative director. For a moment, he thought it was a joke. He clicked it open, reading the short write-up. There was a photo of Kayla standing beside James Hart, both smiling at a charity event. Her hair was styled neatly, her eyes bright with calm confidence. She looked nothing like the quiet, trembling woman who had left his office a week ago. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. He grabbed the phone, dialing her number, but it went straight to voicemail. He didn't know what to say even if she had answered. The article spread fast. By morning, clients were calling him, asking questions he didn't have answers for. Reporters started connecting timelines, her ideas, his company, her sudden exit. Derek's lawyer called. "You should prepare," he said cautiously. "There might be a legal review on intellectual property. People are talking." Derek paced his office, anger rising like fire. "She's using my idea," he shouted. "Her idea, actually," the lawyer corrected quietly. "There are documents, sketches, and witnesses who can confirm that. I suggest staying quiet for now." But Derek couldn't. His pride was louder than reason. He released a public statement accusing Kayla of stealing concepts, hoping to destroy her credibility. It backfired instantly. Screenshots of her original notebook and timestamps surfaced online. Former employees from his company began posting stories about how she had worked late nights while Derek took credit. The internet turned fast, and for the first time in his life, Derek Cole was not admired, he was despised. Meanwhile, Kayla woke up early every day, walking by the river before heading to her new office at Hart Industries. Her team grew quickly, a mix of designers, teachers, and everyday people who believed in her vision. She didn't wear luxury brands or diamonds. She wore soft-colored blouses, her hair in a neat bun, a calm smile on her face. Her confidence returned quietly, not loud or showy. James often watched her during meetings, admiring how she spoke with both grace and certainty. She wasn't like the high-powered executives he usually dealt with. She was grounded, real, and the people in the room listened when she spoke. One afternoon, as they finished reviewing a campaign, James said softly, "You know, when I started building my company, I thought success meant never being vulnerable. But you lead differently. You make people want to believe again." Kayla smiled faintly. "I spent too many years around someone who led with fear. I don't ever want to be that person." That night, the new planners went live online under the name Rise and Rebuild by Kayla Cole. Within 24 hours, orders poured in from all over the country. The product description read, "For anyone who was told they were nothing, this planner is your reminder that you are enough." The slogan went viral. News outlets picked up the story. People posted videos crying as they opened their planners, reading the first printed quote on page 1, "Your story isn't over just because someone walked away." At the same time, Derek's world fell apart. Investors pulled away. His brand's reputation crashed. Old partners avoided his calls. Every attempt to rebuild ended with someone asking about Kayla. He couldn't escape her name. Late at night, sitting in the dark with only his reflection staring back at him from the window, he replayed their last conversation in the lawyer's office. "You think money is the only way to be somebody." The words echoed. For the first time, he wondered if she had been right. Weeks later, at a charity gala hosted by Hart Industries, the ballroom glittered with lights. Kayla stood by the entrance greeting guests wearing a simple ivory dress. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered. On the big screen behind her, clips played of families and small businesses that had used her planners to start over. Each testimonial ended with the same line, "Because of this, I believe in myself again." James joined her, offering a glass of sparkling juice. "You did this," he said. Kayla smiled softly. "We did it." As they stood together, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the room, Derek in a dark suit, looking thinner and more tired than before. The crowd seemed to part around him as he walked forward, eyes locked on her. For a moment, silence filled the hall. James's jaw tightened, but Kayla gently touched his arm, signaling him not to interfere. She stepped forward alone. Derek stopped a few feet away. His voice was low, rough around the edges. "You look different," he said. Kayla met his gaze calmly. "I am different," she replied. He swallowed hard, glancing around at the elegant crowd, the screens, the cameras flashing her name. "You really did it," he muttered. "You actually made it work without me." Kayla nodded slowly. "I didn't need to prove it to you, I just needed to remember it myself." Derek lowered his eyes. "I lost everything." She took a slow breath. "No, Derek, you still have your choices. That's more than most people get." He looked up, confused. She continued, "You can spend the rest of your life blaming me, or you can start learning from what broke you. The money isn't the loss, Derek. The loss is forgetting who you were before it blinded you." Her voice was calm but firm. He had no response. He just nodded slowly and stepped back. Kayla turned and walked away, her steps steady, her heart lighter than it had been in years. As the night went on, music filled the hall, laughter rising above it. James watched her from across the room, pride in his eyes. She wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was inspiring thousands to do the same. When the event ended and the last guests left, Kayla stepped onto the balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below. James joined her, handing her a coat. They stood in silence for a while, watching the cars move like rivers of light. "You know," James said quietly, "the first time I saw you, I thought you looked broken, but now I see it, you were never broken, you were just waiting to find the right place to start again." Kayla smiled softly. "Maybe we all are," she said. "Sometimes the fall is just the push we needed." Below them, the wind carried faint music from another street. The city that had once swallowed her now felt like home. For the first time since she left that cold office, Kayla felt peace. She turned to James and said, "Thank you for believing when I didn't." He shook his head gently. "You believed first, Kayla, you just forgot for a while." She laughed quietly, the sound blending with the night air. Somewhere far below, a billboard flickered with bright letters, "Rising Together, Heart Industries x Kayla Cole." It wasn't just a business, it was a story of redemption written in real time. And somewhere in a small apartment on the other side of the city, Derek sat alone with one of her new planners open on the table in front of him. The first page read, "Change starts when you stop waiting for someone else to save you." He stared at it for a long moment before picking up a pen. For the first time in years, he began to write, not about money, not about power, but about who he used to be. Kayla didn't know that part of the story yet. She didn't know that her pain had started a ripple that was changing even the man who broke her. But deep inside, she felt it, that quiet certainty that every ending hides the seed of something new. The morning sun spilled through the glass walls of the Hart Tower, soft golden light brushing across the floor. It was early, quiet, and peaceful, the kind of calm that hides behind big beginnings. Kayla sat alone in the conference room, fingers wrapped around a cup of warm coffee. The city was just waking up below her, horns starting, people rushing, but she stayed still, breathing deeply. The skyline reflected in the glass looked endless, and for once so did her possibilities. Today marked exactly 6 months since the day she walked out of that divorce office. 6 months since everything had fallen apart, only for something new to begin growing in its place. 6 months since she met James Hart, the man who saw her when no one else did. The Rise and Rebuild project had become a global success. People all over the world used her planners to rebuild their lives. From single parents in small towns to young adults trying to escape debt, her work was spreading like quiet wildfire. Every morning she woke up to hundreds of messages, thank yous, stories of transformation, words that filled the space where old pain once lived. She smiled reading them, often whispering a simple prayer of gratitude under her breath. But success had brought new pressure too. The board wanted expansion, investors demanded faster rollouts, and media attention followed her everywhere. Kayla had gone from invisible to unforgettable overnight, and that kind of spotlight came with shadows. There were still moments when she questioned herself, moments when she wondered if she truly deserved this second chance. She thought of her past often, not with bitterness but with awareness. She had been broken once. She refused to be blind again. The glass door opened quietly behind her. James walked in, sleeves rolled up, tie loose, holding a folder. His presence filled the room like steady gravity. "You're here early," he said, smiling slightly. Kayla looked up. "Couldn't sleep," she replied with a small laugh. "Big presentation today." He nodded, placing the folder on the table. "You've prepared more than enough, you'll do fine." She smiled, but there was tension in her shoulders. "I'm not worried about the presentation, I'm worried about who's coming to see it." James paused. "You mean Derek?" Her jaw tightened. She nodded once. The words tasted strange. The board had invited Derek Cole as part of a public reconciliation move, an image strategy to show maturity and collaboration. Kayla hadn't agreed easily, but James had told her gently, "Sometimes facing your past in daylight is the only way to prove you're not afraid of it anymore." Though she had said yes. Now that the day had come, her stomach turned. She hadn't seen Derek since that charity night when he looked at her like a man watching his own ghost. She had hoped that would be the last time, but the world had other plans. James studied her face. "You don't owe him a thing," he said quietly, "not even your fear." Kayla looked at him and nodded, her voice soft. "I know, but sometimes strength isn't about winning a fight, it's about staying calm when the person who hurt you walks into the room." The meeting started an hour later. The room filled with people, board members, investors, and journalists eager to witness the collaboration of the year. Cameras lined the back wall. The Hart Industries logo glowed bright behind the glass, and at the center of it all sat the new project files for Rise and Rebuild Global. Kayla entered last, wearing a simple navy dress that complemented her calm strength. She took her seat at the head of the table, heart steady. The air buzzed with quiet anticipation. Then the elevator chimed and footsteps echoed from the hallway. Everyone turned slightly. Derek Cole walked in. He looked different, thinner, quieter, less sure of himself. The confidence he used to wear like a suit of armor was cracked, but his eyes were still sharp, still searching. He wore a dark gray suit, but it didn't carry the power it once did. For a moment he froze when he saw her. Kayla didn't look away, their eyes met, and for the first time she didn't feel small, she just felt steady. "Mr. Cole," James greeted politely, shaking his hand. Derek returned it stiffly, his gaze flicking to Kayla again before he sat down. The cameras began recording. The presentation began. Kayla stood and walked to the large screen. Her voice was calm, clear, professional. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. 6 months ago, we started with a simple mission to help people rebuild not just their finances, but their confidence. Today, Rise and Rebuild has reached over 2 million users across 12 countries, but we're just getting started." As she spoke, slides flashed behind her, photos of families, classrooms, small shops, her planners in different languages, testimonials rolling in real time. The audience watched in awe. Even Derek's posture shifted slightly, surprise flickering across his face. Kayla continued, "When we help people take control of their money, we give them something even more powerful: hope. This isn't about charity, it's about empowerment. Real change happens when people believe again." The room broke into applause, cameras clicked, reporters scribbled. Kayla smiled, but her hands trembled slightly behind the podium. James caught her eye and gave a small nod. She steadied. Then it was time for the Q&A session. A journalist stood. "Ms. Cole," she asked, "many people know about your past business ties with Mr. Cole. How does it feel to be collaborating publicly after everything that happened?" The room fell quiet. Derek's jaw flexed. Kayla took a slow breath. "It feels like healing," she said simply. "Sometimes life gives us people to teach us lessons, not to stay, but to prepare us for who we're meant to become. I don't hold anger anymore, I just hold gratitude for what those lessons taught me." Her answer disarmed everyone. Even Derek looked down for a moment, caught between shame and respect. After the conference ended, people crowded around Kayla, shaking her hand, congratulating her. Derek stood off to the side, watching quietly. When the crowd thinned, he approached. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Kayla hesitated, then nodded. They stepped into a small garden terrace beside the conference room. The air was cool, the city sounds faint below. Derek shoved his hands into his pockets. "You've changed," he said quietly. Kayla smiled faintly. "I had to." He looked down at the ground. "I ruined everything we had, I know that now. I didn't just lose you, I lost myself too." She stayed silent, waiting. He went on, voice rough. "After you left, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said that day, about money not being everything. I laughed at you then, I shouldn't have, because when the money was gone, I realized you were right. I used to measure success in bank accounts. Now I see it's measured in peace, and I don't have any." Yeah. Kayla looked at him gently but firmly. "You can't undo what's done, Derek, but you can change what comes next. Start small, learn again. That's what Rise and Rebuild is about." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "You're kinder than I deserve." She shook her head. "Kindness isn't about what people deserve, it's about who I choose to be." A heavy silence stretched between them. Derek finally said, "If you ever need help, any way to make things right, I'll do it." Kayla gave him a small, tired smile. "Just do better with your next chance, that's all the help I need." He nodded, stepping back. "You really did rebuild," he said softly. "I didn't rebuild," she replied, "I rose." He looked at her one last time, then turned and walked away, his shoulders heavy but his steps slow and thoughtful. That evening, Kayla returned to her office. James was there, leaning by the window, watching the city glow. "How'd it go?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Peaceful, for once it felt peaceful." He turned toward her, his eyes warm. "You handled that with grace. Most people would have burned the bridge and walked away." Kayla sat down, her tone soft. Sometimes burning isn't the answer. Sometimes you just leave the bridge standing to remind yourself where you came from. He smiled at that. You're wiser than most leaders I know. She laughed quietly. I'm just someone who learned the hard way. James watched her for a moment. The glow from the city lights touched her face gently. You know, he said slowly, every great company I've built started because I met one person who made me see life differently. For this one, that person was you. Kayla looked up, caught off guard. Me. He nodded. You reminded me that leadership isn't about power, it's about purpose. Their eyes met, a moment of quiet understanding passing between them. No words, no promises, just the soft recognition of two people who had survived storms and learned to stand taller afterward. The next few weeks blurred into long days and fuller nights. Kayla traveled from city to city, visiting schools and communities, meeting people who had used her planners to rebuild their lives. In one town, a young single father showed her how his small repair shop had grown thanks to budgeting tips. In another, a teenage girl handed her a handmade thank you card, saying, "Your planner made me believe I can go to college." Each encounter left Kayla more grounded. She carried their stories in her heart like small lights guiding her forward. But fame also brought whispers. Some media outlets speculated about her relationship with James Hart. Headlines hinted at romance, business partnership, and scandal. Kayla ignored them, but the noise grew louder. James noticed the tension too. One evening, after another headline appeared, he walked into her office. "Do you want me to issue a public statement?" he asked. Kayla looked up from her desk. "No, let them talk. The truth doesn't need defending, it needs consistency." He smiled. "That's very you." She laughed lightly. "What does that mean?" "It means you're the calm in every storm," he said simply, "and that's rare." For a moment, silence lingered between them, gentle, warm, and full of something unspoken. Then Kayla broke it with a small sigh. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm really ready for all this attention. I just wanted to help people, not become a headline." James's voice was steady. "You can't control what the world says, you can only control what you do next. So keep doing what you do best, showing them how to rise." The following month, Rise and Rebuild hit its biggest milestone. Their new mobile app reached 5 million downloads. The company celebrated with a gala at the city's Central Convention Hall. Kayla walked in wearing a deep emerald gown, her hair in soft curls, her smile calm but bright. The room erupted when she entered. Flashing lights, cameras, cheers, it was overwhelming, but this time she didn't shrink. She belonged here. James met her halfway, offering his arm. "Ready for your speech, Ms. Cole." She smiled. "Let's give them something to remember." On stage, she took the microphone, scanning the crowd. "6 months ago," she began, "I walked out of a building thinking my life was over. Today, I stand here knowing that sometimes loss isn't the end, it's just life clearing the space for something better." Applause filled the room, cameras flashed. She continued, "To everyone watching, no matter what someone took from you, no matter who walked away, please remember this: you are not finished. You are not broken, you are becoming." The crowd rose to their feet. Some clapped, others cried. James stood in the corner, watching her with quiet pride. He had seen hundreds of business speeches in his life, but this one was different. This wasn't about products or profits, it was about purpose. Later that night, when the crowd faded and the lights dimmed, Kayla stepped outside onto the balcony again. The cool breeze brushed against her face. She looked up at the stars above the skyscrapers, her heart full. James joined her silently, standing beside her. "You did it," he said softly. She smiled. "We did it." He glanced at her. "No," he said gently. "You did. You built this with your pain, your hope, your heart. I just helped you find the light switch." She laughed quietly. "Maybe that's what good people do, they help you see yourself again." For a long moment, they stood in silence, looking out at the city that had once broken her and now held her victory. Across town, Derek sat in his modest apartment, watching her speech replay on the news. The screen glowed softly in the dark room. He watched her confidence, her peace, her forgiveness, and something inside him finally settled. He opened his planner again, now filled with small notes and ideas for a new business, one that would focus on rebuilding trust and integrity. For the first time, he wasn't chasing Kayla's shadow, he was chasing redemption. He closed the planner gently, whispering, "Thank you," to no one in particular. Back in her hotel room later that night, Kayla sat by the window again, feet tucked under her, sipping tea. The city glittered below. Her phone buzzed with messages, congratulations, interviews, praise. She smiled faintly, set it aside, and opened her notebook. It wasn't for work this time, it was for her heart. She wrote quietly on the first blank page, "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means freeing yourself so you can grow again." She closed the notebook, leaning back. Somewhere deep inside, she knew her story wasn't finished yet. There were still lessons ahead, still roads to walk. But for now, peace filled the spaces where pain used to live. And outside, the city lights shimmered like promises, soft, endless, and bright. The soft hum of applause still echoed faintly in Kayla's ears as the night wind brushed against her hair. The gala had ended hours ago, but the energy from the crowd, the warmth of their smiles, and the glow of the cameras lingered like stars that refused to fade. She stood on the balcony of the Hart Foundation suite, overlooking the wide stretch of city lights. Down below, New York pulsed with life, cars moving like veins of light, voices rising and falling, stories unfolding in every corner. The same city that once watched her cry in silence was now watching her shine in peace. It was almost poetic. She closed her eyes for a second and breathed deeply. The air carried that strange mix of rain and smoke and distant music, a smell she once associated with loneliness, now tied to rebirth. Behind her, the sliding glass door opened quietly. James stepped out holding 2 mugs of coffee. His tie was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly undone. For once, the man the world saw as perfectly composed looked humanly tired but peaceful. "You should get some rest," he said softly, handing her one of the mugs. She took it with a small smile. "Rest is for tomorrow," she replied. "Tonight I just want to remember." He smiled faintly, leaning against the railing beside her. "Then let's remember together." They stood side by side in comfortable silence. The city stretched before them like a painting, every window glowing with a story of its own. Kayla sipped her coffee slowly, eyes drifting to the dark horizon. "It still feels unreal sometimes," she whispered. "How everything changed, how I changed." James looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "That's the thing about storms," he said quietly. "They break what needs breaking and wash away what you don't need anymore. What's left standing is stronger than before." She smiled softly, the corners of her eyes glistening. "You make it sound so simple," he chuckled lightly. "It's not simple, but it's true." They both laughed quietly, the sound light against the heavy stillness of the night. After a moment, she said, "I keep thinking about the people who wrote me those messages from strangers. They're the real story. Every time I feel like slowing down, I read one. There was this woman last week, a widow from Atlanta. She wrote that the planner helped her rebuild after losing everything. She said she's saving again, baking cakes to sell, and teaching her grandkids not to be afraid of starting small. Can you imagine? That's one life changed by a notebook I almost threw away when I left Derek." James's voice was soft. "That's why it worked, because it came from pain that was honest. You didn't build this for money, you built it from the ashes of something real." Kayla looked down at her coffee. "I used to think success meant being seen. Now I think it means seeing others. That's what I want to keep doing, seeing people who think they don't matter and showing them they do." James nodded. "That's your gift." Inside, the sound of phones buzzing interrupted the quiet moment. Kayla sighed, walking back into the room. Her assistant had left her phone charging on the table, and the screen lit up with dozens of notifications. Most were messages of congratulations, but one caught her attention. It was from her lawyer, marked urgent. She frowned, opened it, and began reading. Her expression shifted slowly from calm to surprise. "What is it?" James asked, stepping closer. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "It's from the court. Derek just transferred ownership of the entire planner division back to me. He signed everything over voluntarily." James blinked. "What?" She nodded slowly, stunned. "He sent a statement too. It says he wants to clear his conscience. He admitted I was the creator and apologized publicly. He's dissolving his old company." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what she had just said filled the air. Then Kayla sat down slowly, covering her mouth with one trembling hand. Tears spilled silently from her eyes, not from pain this time, but from something deeper, closure, the thing she never thought she'd get. "He didn't have to do that," she whispered. James walked over and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Sometimes the hardest apology is the one that comes when no one expects it. Maybe he finally saw what you were trying to teach him all along." Kayla wiped her tears, laughing softly through them. Maybe people do change after all. The next morning, the news exploded. Headlines across media platforms read, "Former CEO Derek Cole returns planners to original creator in emotional statement." Journalists flooded her inbox for comments. Kayla released a short statement that simply read, "Forgiveness is not weakness. It's the strength to let go when the apology finally comes." The internet reacted with overwhelming support. People reposted her quote millions of times, calling her the woman who rose. As days passed, Derek's name faded from scandal to sympathy. He began quietly volunteering with small business programs, helping struggling entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes he made. Occasionally, Kayla received short updates from mutual contacts. She never reached out, but she wished him well in silence. In her heart, the chapter had closed completely. Meanwhile, the Rise and Rebuild Foundation grew beyond imagination. Schools adopted her planners as financial education tools. Nonprofits used them to teach budgeting in communities. Even government agencies reached out to collaborate. What started as a woman's broken dream now shaped the way millions rebuilt their lives. Months later, Kayla and James traveled to Lagos, Nigeria, for an international women's empowerment conference sponsored by Heart Industries. The air there felt different, warmer, alive, filled with color and sound. Street vendors laughed, children ran barefoot, music spilled from open windows. Kayla loved it instantly. On the second day, she stood on stage before thousands of women from across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. The theme was reclaiming your power. When she stepped up to the microphone, the crowd quieted. Her voice, gentle but firm, carried across the room. "When people tell you that you can't rise again," she said, "remember that no one, not a man, not a mistake, not even a past, has the right to define your ending. You define it. You are the author. You hold the pen." The crowd erupted in cheers, women shouting her name, waving banners with her slogan, "Rise and Rebuild." Kayla smiled, tears in her eyes. She looked down at the front row and saw James watching her, clapping slowly with pride. She smiled at him, and for a brief moment, everything, the pain, the healing, the fight, felt worth it. That night, after the event, they walked along the quiet streets of Lagos Marina, the moonlight shimmering on the water. James looked over at her. "You were incredible today," he said. She laughed softly. "They were incredible. I just reminded them what they already knew." He smiled. "You remind everyone, Kayla, even me." She stopped, turning to face him. The street was quiet except for the distant hum of cars and soft waves against the docks. "You've been there through everything," she said quietly. "From the moment I walked out of that building, you've been beside me. Why?" James's eyes softened. "Because I saw myself in you. I know what it's like to lose everything and start from scratch. I know how heavy silence feels when people stop believing in you. You reminded me that purpose matters more than profit. I guess I never stopped believing in you." Kayla's voice was barely a whisper, "And I never stopped being grateful for you." The air between them shifted, gentle, unspoken, full of quiet understanding. James reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Whatever the next chapter is, you won't face it alone," he said. She smiled softly, eyes shining under the moonlight. "Maybe for the first time, I don't feel like I have to." Over the next year, their partnership grew stronger. Together, they built programs that reached over 50 countries. The Rise and Rebuild app became a movement, not just a product. Kayla started a foundation for women leaving toxic marriages and abusive partnerships, giving them tools to start again. She visited small towns, met survivors, listened to their stories, and helped them believe that broken beginnings didn't mean broken futures. Everywhere she went, she saw parts of herself in them, and she gave back what she once needed most: hope. James often watched her work from a distance, quietly proud. They never rushed their connection into labels or headlines. What they shared was deeper than romance. It was trust, friendship, and respect built on ashes and rebuilt in light. They were two people who had faced darkness and chosen to walk toward grace instead of revenge. One afternoon, exactly 2 years after her divorce, Kayla returned to the old coffee shop where she first met Derek. The place had changed a little, new walls, different staff, but the smell of roasted beans and warm pastries was the same. She sat by the window where she used to dream of a better life, watching people pass by with busy faces. A young barista approached with a smile. "You look familiar," she said shyly. "Are you the woman from Rise and Rebuild?" Kayla smiled gently. "Yes, I am." The girl's eyes lit up. "My mom uses your planner. She says it saved our family. She told me to tell you thank you if I ever met you." Kayla's heart swelled. "Then tell her she saved herself," she said softly. She ordered a cup of plain coffee, the same as she used to when life was simpler, and sat there quietly thinking. Her reflection in the window looked different now. Older, wiser, peaceful, she realized she no longer carried pain in her eyes, she carried light. Across the street, a little boy helped his mother pick up groceries that had spilled on the sidewalk. Kayla smiled as she watched them. Life went on messy, beautiful, unstoppable. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "I'm free." That night back in her apartment, she opened her original old planner, the one she had drawn by hand all those years ago. The pages were yellow and corners bent, but it still smelled faintly of ink and late nights. She turned to the first page where she had once written, "Dreams are built from broken days." Underneath it, she added a new line in neat handwriting, "And healing turns broken days into beautiful lives." She closed the book smiling. Months later, Hart Industries hosted the Rise and Rebuild Global Summit, gathering leaders, dreamers, and survivors from around the world. The theme this time was from nothing to something. When Kayla walked onto the massive stage, the audience of thousands rose to their feet cheering. Her face appeared on giant screens across the hall. She stood there for a moment, taking it all in, the faces, the energy, the love, and then began to speak. "When I started," she said, "I was just a woman with a notebook and a broken heart. I thought my world had ended, but now I understand it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything I was meant to become. Every closed door pushed me toward the right one. Every person who doubted me forced me to believe in myself. Every betrayal built my strength. So if you're sitting here today thinking it's too late, thinking you've lost too much, remember me. I was once where you are. And if I can rise, you can too." The audience cheered, some crying openly. Cameras captured every word. Kayla looked toward the side of the stage where James stood watching, pride shining in his eyes. She smiled at him, a silent thank you for being her anchor. When the event ended, people crowded around her, shaking her hand, taking pictures. A little girl no older than 7 tugged at her dress. "Miss Kayla," she said shyly, "my mom said you're a superhero." Kayla knelt down, smiling warmly. "Your mom is wrong," she said playfully. "I'm just someone who didn't give up. That makes you a superhero too if you promise not to give up either." The girl giggled and hugged her tightly before running off. As the lights dimmed and the crowd began to fade, Kayla walked back to the balcony one last time. The city below glittered like a river of light. James joined her, hands in his pockets, quiet as always. They didn't need words. Everything that needed to be said lived in the peace between them. Finally, James spoke. "You know what I realized tonight?" Kayla looked at him, smiling. "What?" He turned toward her, eyes soft. "You didn't just rebuild your life, you rebuilt others. That's the kind of legacy that never fades." Kayla looked out at the skyline, her heart full. "Then maybe that's enough," she said quietly. "Not revenge, not fame, just change, real change." He nodded, "And you made it happen." The wind picked up slightly, carrying the faint sound of music from somewhere below. Kayla closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. For the first time in a long time, her soul felt completely still, not empty, just full of peace, grace, and quiet strength. She turned back to James. "Thank you," she said simply. He smiled. "For what?" "For showing up when I needed to remember who I was," she replied. He took a deep breath and said, "Then promise me something. Promise you'll never forget again." She smiled, eyes glistening in the light. "I promise." Below them, the crowd outside still lingered, chanting her name softly. Kayla Cole, the woman who rose. The woman who turned pain into purpose, heartbreak into hope, and failure into faith. As the final lights of the night flickered across the skyline, Kayla whispered to herself one last line that she would later print on the inside cover of every future planner she released. "The end of your old story is the beginning of your new strength." She turned to James, and together they watched the city breathe, alive, unstoppable, and full of second chances. Sparkles, thank you for watching today's story. If Kayla's journey inspired you, remember, your story isn't over until you decide it is. Speech Balloon, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Pushpin, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to support our growth.